Hi and welcome back to a new video. Today we are going to look at this PowerColor Liquid Devil. It's an RX 7900 XTX. Basically comes with an EKWB water cooler pre-installed. We recently also made our own water-cooled card with a Corsair water block, so we have some kind of reference to see what kind of temperatures should be expected when it comes to the GPU temperature. That's what we're going to compare. I know it's a bit difficult to compare different cards, but at least we have some sort of baseline for comparison. What I want to check out is the overall build quality, the cooler, how it's designed, and also how it's installed with like thermal pads, thermal paste and everything else. This is what you get when you open the box. So we have the card still inside the protective foil, and on the right we have an accessory box, and if we open up this one, you can see that there is an EKWB leak tester included, which I think is a great idea. Theoretically, at least, somebody who's going to buy a card with a water block pre-installed might also be somebody who never built a custom water cooling loop before. So that might be a nice accessory to have. Looking at the card itself, it's all decorated with the PowerColor Liquid Devil logo. So basically this one in a smaller version, which you can find all over the EK block. Generally, the block is made out of acrylic, so the top part, and everything that comes to the cooling, so the cold plate, is made out of nickel-plated copper. The Liquid Devil comes equipped with 3 8-pin PCIe connectors, so that's one more than a normal reference design card or MBA design card. Here in the front we have a BIOS switch, which allows to switch from OC to Unleashed. And I want to find out what exactly the difference is. OC is kind of like the stock BIOS, and Unleashed maybe has a higher like OC limit, higher power target, whatever. We will find out. And the backside is covered with a backplate that is, I think, just purely for mechanical protection and also stability, but it doesn't really form or help with thermals because there are no thermal pads or anything underneath. You can pretty much look through it, but also, I mean, it's a custom water-cooled card, so I don't think there is a lot of heat that has to be dissipated through the backplate, so I guess that should be just fine. I will now add the card to my loop and perform the thermal testing because I don't want to open it up right now and ruin kind of the default thermal state. Card is in place, what a beautiful one. And it's also pretty big, but I really like the design of this one. I'm going to install WireView. It's another prototype, this time with triple 8-pin. It obviously is a prototype, that's why there is no cover yet. There will be some kind of like aluminum cover on top with like nice laser engraving and everything, but I'm just going to install this triple 8-pin version now to keep track of the power consumption during our test. RGB already looks pretty decent. Seems like I have to change flow direction. I thought that this would be inlet and this outlet, but that seems to be the opposite way. At least there was no marker on the block itself, so I had to kind of find it out myself, and because everything is covered, you cannot really see it. But just so you know, if you want to use it, then the proper way to install it would be inlet, outlet. Apart from that, pretty nice design. Card is running, driver is installed. First check for me whenever I'm running a water-cooled card is to check temperatures in idle. But this looks pretty decent. A GPU temperature in idle 26 couldn't be any better, I would say. Room temperature right here is about 22, so that's pretty much on point. And the second test I usually perform is just with a quick render test because this doesn't perform or this doesn't cause such a high load. So it's a good indicator to check if there's any kind of contact issue or anything, but with the like rather light load of about 200 watt, I mean, yeah, 30 and 45, that's a very good indicator that everything should be installed correctly. I mean, I didn't expect anything else. Now I want to see what kind of differences we can find with the OC and the Unleashed BIOS. First of all, the clock limit. In the OC BIOS seems to be 3900 megahertz, which should be more than enough. I mean, stock, at least in this test, was about 3000, so yeah, that should be fine. Power limit max is plus 15 with the OC configuration. I will now switch to the unleashed mode and restart, and then we will check if there's any kind of difference. Obviously Makita has to check that everything is done correctly, executed correctly. Switching to unleashed mode. To be fully honest, I'm not quite sure if there even is a difference, because looking at the clock, I mean, that's maybe 15 megahertz, but the overall clock limit didn't really change and the power limit is also still the same. So yeah, I'm not quite sure. I will now perform the gaming test and then we will see. In 3D My Time Spy Extreme, the card is pulling about 350 to 360 watt during Time Spy Extreme GT1, at least just across the 8-pin PCIe connectors. And this was measured in the OC BIOS, so pretty much the stock configuration. In this test we see a performance of about 98.34 FPS, which is pretty solid for a 7900 XTX. Looking at a GPU clock, with OC BIOS we can see around 2640 to 2670 FPS. In the Unleashed BIOS we can see a slightly increased power consumption and I think about 370 to 380 watt. We also had a change in supervising and now Sheik is in charge and Makita went to bed. With the Unleashed BIOS it's a slight increase in performance, but not really much. We increased to 99.72, which is an increase of about 1.3 to 1.4%. Not really a lot. We can see the same kind of difference in the clocks, from about 40 to 60 megahertz increase to a total of about 2680 to 2720 megahertz under load. Right now I'm running the gaming test to get the temperature data, and at the same time we are going to hear or look at the VRMs in terms of coil whine, which I would say is kind of moderate on this card to a bit higher, but that's also because it's a custom water cooled card and thus you can usually hear it a bit more because generally the entire system is going to be much more quiet than with air cooling. Now let's open up the card and see how the build quality looks like. Tiny, but I think also nice detail. If you look at the back, you see that this backplate has been stamped, which means that this is not like a glued on logo, but it's actually part of the backplate that has been milled over after the entire processing. So that's actually the better quality than just sticking a logo on there. Underneath the backplate there are no more remaining screws, which means that the entire mechanical force is applied through the screws to the backplate, which allows to spread the mechanical force a bit more evenly than having screws directly set to the PCB. Also that technically is the better solution. The cooler itself is, I would say, a decent quality as expected from EK. Nothing unusual. We have a good amount of paste, also good imprint on the paste, also good imprint on the thermal pads that make contact with the video memory. Apart from that, just looks pretty good. And same thing goes to the PCB itself. It's a good amount of paste, good imprint of the paste, also on the pads that make contact with the VRM. The VRM itself is a bit different to an NBA card. I think it's one phase in addition, but that's probably not going to make a big difference. I'm not sure when it comes to the power stages if there's a difference to the NBA card or if there's a big quality difference to them. I'm just not sure, to be honest. I mean, it's a different PCB, you can already tell that by just the fact that you have a 3 8-pin and not only 2. Apart from that, I'm not sure if the PCB itself will make a big difference, compared to any other design, because I mean, the same kind of clocks are expected, same performance are expected. One more small difference I spotted is this glue or underfill that you can find on the lower amount of memory chips that are underneath the GPU. That's something that can be production related. It can be due to higher mechanical stress at this area to additional protect the memory chips. That's something we observed on different kind of cards in the past, also NVIDIA cards. So that's nothing unusual, but something I spotted that's different to other card designs. Let's talk about temperatures. As comparison, we have a 7900 XTX in MBA design, which also means air cooling. The top blue line represents the hotspot temperature and the bottom blue line the normal GPU temperature. We also changed the same GPU to a Corsair water block and as expected could lower the temperature significantly. The GPU temperature was constantly at about 42 to 43 degrees Celsius, which is the bottom yellow line. But let's look at the liquid devil, which is the red line. But interestingly, there doesn't seem to be a big difference. Same goes for the top red line, which represents the hotspot temperature, as well as the bottom red line, which is the normal GPU temperature. It's pretty much on par with the NBA card with Corsair water block. So no difference? Actually, it's not that easy. So let's take a look at the power consumption. Again, in this chart, we can see the NBA card with the blue line with air cooling and with the yellow line with the Corsair block. And in addition, we have the green line, which is representing the ASRock 7900 XTX Phantom OC. So that's also an air-cooled card, but it has a different PCB and allows a higher power consumption and a higher power target. And it's consuming constantly between 380 to 390 watt under load. And now if we look at the Liquid Devil with the red line, we can see that this card allows a much higher power target and also has better cooling because it is constantly running at 410 watt under load. And if we think back at the temperature chart, it has the same temperature as the NBA card, which was consuming 60 watt less. So 60 watt more on the Liquid Devil, but same temperature. That's a pretty solid result for PowerColor and the EK block. This also means, because we can see this very straight line, that the 7900 XTX Liquid Devil is actually power target limited and not cooling limited. This increased power consumption is caused by the higher clock. As comparison, again NBA card with blue and yellow, about 2500 MHz under load, gaming load. The ASRock Phantom OC will perform better, has a higher power target and has about 2650 MHz under load. And honestly speaking, that's why I was pretty flashed. Looking at this result with the Liquid Devil, that's featuring 2850 MHz under load. That is 350 MHz increase over an NBA card. And now going back to the 3D Mark times by Extreme GT1 results, which we already looked at earlier, with about 100 FPS under load, that is actually quite quick for a 7900 XTX. And it's about 11% faster than my 7900 XTX in NBA design. And this also clearly beats an RTX 4080. Honestly speaking, for a 7900 XTX, pretty impressive. We quickly also want to dive into overclocking. That's why I increased the power target to plus 15%, which increased the power consumption across the 8-pin PCIe connectors from about 370 to about 430 to 440 watt. The max overclockable setting with this card, at least in the MSI Afterburner setting, is 3200 MHz, which is obviously not the real clock in the benchmark. We see typically between 2720 to max 2800 MHz in the 3D Mark times by Extreme test. That's because the load is just significantly higher than during gaming, but we can also see that it's just purely power limited, so it would require additional modifications to unlock the power target further to get a higher performance. Still, if we look into the times by Extreme GT1, that's 105.44 FPS, which is about 10% over a stock 7900 XTX NBA design. So that's pretty impressive. The 7900 XTX Liquid Devil is probably the best 7900 XTX card you can buy. I mean, if you look at the clocks and also the related performance, it's pretty insane for a 7900 XTX, because you could just go ahead, theoretically speaking, and buy an NBA card. That is a lot cheaper, because this one, at least in Germany, is listed for almost 1,700 euro. And for about 500 euro less, you can get any other 7900 XTX and maybe equip it with a custom water block yourself. But then you might still not be able to achieve these kind of clocks that you see stock with this card. There is not a big difference between the OC and the Unleashed BIOS. I mean, it's 20 to 30 megahertz. Doesn't really make a huge difference, but the performance out of the box with this card is pretty amazing. There are some features we didn't really look at. I mean, in the end, it's a single slot design. It has RGB, which you can use. We just used it with red because I think it just fits to the design. And you have 3 8-pin PCIe, which you might not get on an NBA design card, or which you will not get on an NBA design card. But apart from that, technically speaking, it's probably the best 7900 XTX you can get. The only thing I would like to see is more attention towards the chokes, towards the coil whine, because I mean, it's a very expensive card, and I hope that in future we will see cards with less coil whine. It's in an acceptable state, but it could be better. So there's something you could improve PowerColor, but overall speaking, that is a pretty amazing product. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Bye bye.